Flash Gordon was once the space adventure that astonished the world in 1980. But 45 years have passed, and the strangest twists have happened not on screen, but in the real lives of its cast. From legends who rose above scandal, to icons overwhelmed by illness, to stars who unexpectedly changed careers, everything has transformed in ways that still shock fans today. Join us as we uncover the stories behind it all. Max von Sydow as the Emperor. Ming. Max von Sydow was born on April 10, 1929, in Lund, Sweden. At 51 years old, he played Emperor Ming, the elegant tyrant whose stillness made Flash Gordon 1980 strangely hypnotic. The performance became iconic instantly, yet behind that regal mask was a man carrying wounds far older than the role itself. His first marriage to Christina Olin lasted nearly 3 decades, but the strain of constant travel and the emotional toll of his collaborations with Ingmar Bergman slowly hollowed their connection. During the filming of The Exorcist, 1973, when he portrayed Father Merrin with unbearable spiritual weight, the tension between career and home reached a point he could no longer ignore. When their marriage broke in 1979, he described the aftermath as a silence I didn't know how to fill, turning to meditation just to navigate days. The dissolution was made even sharper by the fact that they had shared his rise from The Seventh Seal, 1957, to international acclaim. His life took a gentler shape when he married Catherine Breillat in 1997, a period that coincided with some of his most emotionally demanding roles, including Pele the Conqueror, 1987, and Awakenings, 1990. These performances required a vulnerability that mirrored his attempts to rebuild himself emotionally, and critics noted how his work deepened as his personal life stabilized. Age began to place limits on him, yet he continued acting, driven by a belief that storytelling was the only way he knew to stay connected to the world. Max von Sydow died on March 8, 2020, at his home in Provence, France, at 90 years old. His estate, built from more than 150 films and 7 decades of work, was valued at approximately $16 million, a testament to the endurance of a career that spanned continents and generations. He was laid to rest near his home, not far from the quiet hills where he spent his final years. Brian Blessed as Prince Voltan. Brian Blessed was born on October 9, 1936, in Goldthorpe, Yorkshire. At 44 years old, he played Prince Voltan, the roaring winged king of the Hawkmen in Flash Gordon, 1980. Audiences loved the thunder he brought to the screen, but when the cameras cut, the noise of his own life was far more complicated. His first marriage to Anne Bowman fractured under the pressure of his relentless stage commitments, especially during the years he performed in Z-Cars, 1962 to 1965, and the BBC epic I, Claudius, 1976, both of which demanded months of absence. When the marriage ended, he carried the guilt quietly, burying himself in new roles to avoid confronting what he had lost. His second marriage to Hildegard Neal brought him the stability he had long needed, but her death in 2023 reopened a wound he had spent decades trying to close. He spoke of her loss while promoting The Turquoise Mountain, explaining that even writing had become painful without her by his side. His health began to falter around the same time, the most visible turning point coming in 2015 when he collapsed during a performance of King Lear. Although a pacemaker allowed him to continue working, the strain showed in the years that followed, and he shifted toward voice acting. Yet even through these limitations, he completed projects like Evil Genius 2, 2021, and continued narrating television specials, proving that his voice remained unbroken despite age and grief. As of 2025, Brian Blessed is 89 years old and living in Surrey, working selectively on roles that allow him to maintain a connection to the craft he refuses to abandon. His estate, valued at around $1.5 million, reflects a career built through persistence rather than luxury. A lifetime of theater, television, film, and daring adventures that shaped him into a legend. Topol as Dr. Hans Zarkov. Topol was born on September 9, 1935, in Tel Aviv. At 45 years old, he played Dr. Hans Zarkov, the eccentric scientist whose manic brilliance powered Flash Gordon, 1980. But behind that smile and theatrical flair was a man who had spent his life wrestling with expectations far larger than himself. His marriage to Galaya Topol, beginning in 1956, endured 66 years. Their relationship was repeatedly tested, especially when he served during the Six-Day War in 1967, leaving Galaya to raise their children while he balanced duty with a growing global career. Even the success of Fiddler on the Roof, 1971, which earned him Oscar and Golden Globe nominations, complicated their lives. At the height of his fame, he performed Tevye more than 2,500 times across continents, sometimes gone for months at a time. In later years, the strain of work softened, but illness began to take its place. Joint pain and heart trouble slowly narrowed his world, eventually evolving into Alzheimer's disease. Even during the years when he toured Fiddler on the Roof across Australia, Canada, and the U.S., the signs of decline quietly shadowed him, forcing him to withdraw from his farewell tour after a shoulder injury in 2009. Yet he continued drawing, writing, and supporting children with special needs through Variety Israel, the organization he founded in 1967. Topol died on March 8, 2023 in Tel Aviv at 87 years old, leaving behind an estate valued at roughly $10 million from decades on stage, screen, and international tours. He was buried in Israel, the homeland he carried into every performance. Timothy Dalton as Prince Baron. Timothy Dalton was born on March 21, 1946, in Colwyn Bay, Wales. At 34 years old, he played Prince Baron, the proud, conflicted warrior of Flash Gordon, 1980. The role offered a glimpse of a darker, more intense screen presence that would later define his Bond era. And beneath that aristocratic calm was a man whose private battles were quieter, but no less consuming. His long relationship with Vanessa Redgrave in the 1970s left a deeper wound than he ever publicly admitted. Their breakup lingered for years, shaping the guardedness that followed him into adulthood and influencing why he never married, despite several high-profile relationships. When the Bond storm hit after The Living Daylights, 1987, and License to Kill, 1989, the pressure only intensified the emotional isolation he carried. Criticism of his too serious Bond pushed him into a 3-year hiatus, and a period of depression he escaped only by returning to theater. During this time, his performance as Mr. Rochester in Jane Eyre, 1983, and later as Rhett Butler in Scarlet, 1994, helped shift public perception of him from a wounded Bond to a more respected classical actor. No major illness was publicly known, but age reshaped his career choices. He shifted to character roles. Simon Skinner in Hot Fuzz, 2007, Rassilon in Doctor Who, 2009 to 2010, and Peter Townsend in The Crown, 2022. Roles that allowed him to work without the physical strain that once defined his performances. Even as he appeared in franchises like Toy Story, he purposely stepped away from leading man intensity, choosing steadiness over spectacle and privacy over fame. In 2025, Timothy Dalton is 79 years old, dividing his time between homes in London, West Hollywood, and Antigua. He works sparingly now, preferring roles that challenge rather than exhaust him, a quiet life funded by an estimated net worth of $20 million built from Bond, television epics, and more than 50 films. Peter Wyngarde as Clytus. Peter Wyngarde was born in Marseille, France in 1927. At 53 years old, he played Clytus, the masked executioner whose velvet voice gave Flash Gordon, 1980, its most refined menace. His performance drew heavily on the theatrical elegance that made him a British cult icon. But behind the gold mask was a life marked by scars far deeper than anything the film ever suggested. His secret marriage in the 1950s dissolved quietly, leaving him without children and retreating into a guarded solitude that shaped the rest of his life. The trauma he carried from surviving the Lunghua internment camp in Shanghai resurfaced during the 1970s when PTSD, alcohol, and drugs collided with the pressures of fame. The collapse came in 1975 with the public indecency scandal that nearly destroyed him, even as Jason King, 1969 to 1971, remained one of Britain's most influential TV characters. The flamboyance that had once made him a style icon now became a shell he used to hide how deeply his past was still wounding him. Illness followed as the years passed, emphysema slowly tightening his breath and a failing heart, sending him into bypass surgery in 2012. Yet even then, he kept his flat in Earl's Terrace filled with manuscripts, costumes, and notebooks, continuing voiceover work and late-stage appearances that allowed him to perform without the physical strain of stage roles. His body weakened, but his mind stayed sharp, and he found brief peace in the small routines of a life lived mostly indoors. Peter Wyngarde died on January 15, 2018, in London at 90 years old. His estate, valued at about $2 million, was settled through probate and followed by the auction of more than 250 personal items, including his 1970 Best Dressed Personality trophy. He was cremated at Golders Green, leaving behind a legacy defined as much by mystery and reinvention as by the unforgettable characters he played. Ornella Muti as Princess Aura. Ornella Muti was born on March 9, 1955, in Rome. At 25 years old, she played Princess Aura, the intoxicating femme fatale of Flash Gordon, 1980. Her beauty made the role iconic, but it also cast a long, difficult shadow over her career. Her first marriage to Alessio Orano unraveled under the weight of early fame. Both starred together in The Most Beautiful Wife, 1970, a film that launched her career but also magnified the insecurities inside their relationship. Years later, her second marriage to Federico Facchinetti brought 3 children but also financial battles, legal disputes, and public scrutiny that pushed her toward emotional exhaustion. Even as she won David Di Donatello awards and worked with directors like Damiano Damiani and Marco Ferreri, the label Just a Beauty haunted her enough that she nearly left the industry entirely after Flash Gordon. It took years of European art house roles to rebuild a sense of artistic identity she felt she had lost. She shifted between international films and theater, even declining the Bond film For Your Eyes Only, 1981, because her costume designer was not hired. Periods of reinvention followed, including comedy hits like Madly in Love, collaborations with Woody Allen, and the launch of her jewelry line in 2008, each step part of her attempt to claim a future beyond beauty alone. As of 2025, Ornella Muti is 70 years old, dividing her time between Italy and Moscow while preparing for her role in Roma Elastica. Her net worth, estimated at $5 million, comes from decades of film work, major advertising campaigns, and her business ventures. Sam J. Jones as Flash Gordon. Sam J. Jones was born on August 12, 1954, in Chicago, Illinois. At 26 years old, Jones played Flash Gordon, the All-American quarterback turned intergalactic savior in Flash Gordon, 1980. The role made him an overnight cult icon, but it also thrust him into pressures he never expected. That contrast between sudden fame and private turmoil marked the beginning of a turbulent journey. His marriage to Lynn Eriks dissolved under the weight of his cocaine addiction in the mid-1980s, a struggle exacerbated by career stagnation after his fallout with producer Dino De Laurentiis halted the planned Flash Gordon trilogy. The custody battle that followed left him emotionally drained, even as he tried to rebuild stability through roles in Code Red and The Highwayman. Those productions kept him visible, but they also highlighted how far he had drifted from the bright promise of his 1980 breakthrough. The instability continued through the 1990s, when a string of low-budget films, Maximum Force, Fist of Honor, Baja Run, failed to anchor his career and strained his second marriage to Myrtle Blairvock. Bankruptcy in 2002 marked his lowest point, pushing him to retrain entirely while still taking cameo roles such as Ted, 2012, which openly referenced his past struggles. Those appearances served as both reinvention and confession. By 2025, Jones is 71 years old, working steadily as a security professional while attending fan conventions as a symbol of resilience. His autobiography and the documentary Life After Flash reframed him as a survivor rather than a fallen star, earning him modest financial stability. His estimated net worth of $500,000 reflects a life rebuilt not through blockbuster fame, but through persistence and humility. Melody Anderson as Dale Arden. Melody Anderson was born on December 3, 1955, in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. At 25 years old, Anderson played Dale Arden, the smart, steady, emotional anchor of Flash Gordon, 1980. The role brought her instant global recognition, but she quietly struggled with the pressure that followed. That tension pushed her toward a profound life change. Her acting career accelerated with Dead and Buried, 1981, and Firewalker, 1986. But the constant demands of network television, Manimal, St. Elsewhere, Jake and the Fat Man, left her emotionally depleted. The exhaustion worsened as she attempted to maintain a private personal life, one she kept so guarded that almost nothing about her relationships or marriages was ever made public. Behind the scenes, she admitted that Hollywood's pace left her burned out in every direction. By 1995, after filming Burke's Law, she walked away entirely. Completing her Master of Social Work at NYU, she redirected the intensity once demanded by film sets toward clinical work and addiction treatment. The shift was drastic, but it was shaped by first-hand experiences with colleagues whose lives had collapsed under substance abuse, cases she often cites when explaining why she left Hollywood. In 2025, Anderson is 70 years old and works as a licensed EMDR trauma specialist in Los Angeles and New York, helping families affected by addiction. She appears occasionally at fan conventions, but her life is now defined by service rather than celebrity. Her estimated net worth of $1 million comes from residuals, speaking engagements, and clinical practice, marking a life transformed from screen presence to healer. Mariangela Melato as Kala. Mariangela Melato was born on September 16, 1943, in Milan, Italy. At 36 years old, Melato played Kala, the cold, razor-sharp commander serving Ming in Flash Gordon, 1980. The role showcased her fierce theatrical precision, but the discipline that made her unforgettable on screen came from a life marked by difficult sacrifices. Her marriage ended quietly and left her without children, deepening the loneliness she carried while navigating Italy's male-dominated film system in the 1970s. Even as Swept Away, 1974, earned her worldwide acclaim and a Cannes spotlight, she privately endured battles with producers who dismissed her as too intense for mainstream leads. That tension pushed her toward grueling work schedules, Love and Anarchy, The Seduction of Mimi, Nada, that stretched her emotionally far beyond what the public ever saw. By the 1990s, she retreated from cinema to reclaim control of her craft on stage, performing The Macropolis Affair and Morning Becomes Electra with a severity that critics described as soul-shaking. But behind the applause, her health began faltering. Pancreatic cancer slowly ended her decades-long devotion to performing, forcing her final retirement in 2010 after nearly 50 years of unbroken work. Melato died on January 11, 2013, in Rome at 71 years old, leaving behind a legacy of fierce, transformational performances that shaped Italian feminist cinema. She was cremated in a private ceremony, honoring her lifelong desire for quiet dignity. Her estimated net worth of $3 million reflected a career built not on commercial films, but on artistic rebellion, an actress who changed Italian cinema before illness claimed her too soon. Philip Stone as Zogi, the High Priest. Philip Stone was born on April 14, 1924, in Leeds, England. At 56 years old, Stone played Zogi, the solemn, ritualistic high priest guiding Ming's dark ceremonies in Flash Gordon, 1980. His authority in the role echoed decades of stage training and the gravitas that later made him essential to Stanley Kubrick's inner circle. But his career path had been far from simple. Before acting, Stone worked as an engineer and struggled to shift into theater, taking modest regional roles while supporting a young marriage that eventually faded away from the strain of financial uncertainty. His breakthrough came only after Kubrick personally selected him for A Clockwork Orange, 1971, followed by Barry Lyndon, 1975, and The Shining, 1980. Yet even that momentum could not shield him from the emotional weight of losing his wife, Margaret Pickford, in 1984. This loss left him markedly withdrawn despite continued work in Indiana Jones and The Temple of Doom, 1984, and various BBC dramas. In his later years, Stone appeared less frequently on screen, turning instead to occasional stage work and voice acting, including Theoden in Ralph Bakshi's The Lord of the Rings, 1978. The consistency of his career hid the growing health problems that slowed him throughout the 1990s. As roles diminished, he remained respected but lived largely out of the public eye, his legacy resting quietly on the depth he brought to supporting characters. Stone died on June 15, 2003, in London at 79 years old, ending the journey of one of Kubrick's most trusted performers. He left behind a modest estate and an estimated net worth of $2 million, earned through a lifetime of disciplined, understated work. Though rarely a leading man, he became a legend to cinephiles. William Hootkins as Munson. William Hootkins was born on July 5, 1948, in Dallas, Texas. At 32 years old, he played Munson, the anxious, wisecracking assistant to Dr. Zarkov in Flash Gordon, 1980. His humor made the character memorable, but off-screen, he carried a gravity shaped by years of displacement and artistic struggle. That contrast sharpened the tragedy of his short life. His marriage life remained largely private, but his long years in London were marked by increasing dependence on alcohol, a quiet companion during the professional uncertainty that came with playing supporting roles. Even as his career soared with iconic appearances such as Porkins in Star Wars, 1977, and Major Eaton in Raiders of the Lost Ark, 1981, the pressure of being typecast pushed him deeper into isolation. Those blockbuster successes masked the emotional fatigue he carried while shifting between stage work, television roles, and demanding voice projects for the BBC. By the early 2000s, he found renewed acclaim on stage with Hitchcock Blonde, where his portrayal of Alfred Hitchcock astonished critics and reminded audiences of the depth he rarely had the chance to show on film. Yet the revival came too late. Pancreatic cancer struck suddenly, halting Broadway transfers and ending his final creative surge. Even during treatment, he continued recording audiobooks, determined to leave behind a body of work that displayed more range than Hollywood ever allowed him. Hootkins died in Santa Monica on October 23, 2005, at just 57 years old, and was laid to rest at Sparkman Hillcrest Memorial Park. His estimated net worth of $1 million reflected decades split between Hollywood blockbusters, British theater, and voice artistry. Richard O'Brien as Fico. Richard O'Brien was born on March 25, 1942, in Cheltenham, England. At 38 years old, he played Fico, the oddball member of Ming's court in Flash Gordon, 1980, bringing his trademark strangeness to even the smallest role. But his real legend came from elsewhere. The explosive creativity that defined the Rocky Horror Show, 1973. That success carried both liberation and lifelong controversy. His first marriage to actress Kimi Wong collapsed under the strain of touring, financial instability, and the intensity of developing Rocky Horror, which moved from the Royal Court Theatre to the West End and then into film history. The sudden success pushed him into the public eye, but it also deepened questions he had long held about identity and gender. Those struggles followed him into his next marriages and into the 1990s, even as he earned widespread recognition hosting The Crystal Maze, one of Britain's highest-rated shows. In 2013, O'Brien transitioned and publicly identified as third gender, a moment that brought both global support and fierce criticism. Yet he continued working, performing cabaret pieces, reviving Rocky Horror on stage, and voicing Lawrence Fletcher in Phineas and Ferb for a new generation of fans. His openness about hormone therapy and self-definition became as influential as his artistic work, turning him into an icon far beyond theater culture. By 2025, O'Brien is 83 years old and living in New Zealand, where he holds dual citizenship and continues to write, perform, and advocate for queer and trans communities. His estimated net worth of $5 million grew from royalties, television success, and decades of reinvention. 45 years later, the universe of Flash Gordon is stranger, sadder, and more surprising than anything that played out on screen. But which part of their journey shocked you the most? If you want more unbelievable then and now stories, make sure to like, subscribe, and tell us who you want to explore next.